Hello! In this music composition video tutorial, I will present a mechanism for chord progression tension level control. This is achieved by integrating the Schillinger Diatonic-Symmetric harmony system with a chord type classification scheme as proposed by Paul Hindemith and using a pitch class set interval content mapping. This may sound intimidating, but we will obtain a practical technique for determining the tension level curve in a chord progression, using all possible chord types, beyond traditional triads and thirds. In this episode, the focus is on 3-note chords only, and I will show several examples. Let's put the subject in context. In any type of music we want control over the harmonic tension. The goal is to create a certain tension level curve with gradual or sudden changes. The obvious candidate for tension control is the selection of chord type. We may pick extended or more dissonant chords for tension level increase. Other tension control parameters are root movement and the use of non-diatonic pitches and chromatism. The fundamental approach in this video tutorial is the following. I will present tension control within the framework of the Schillinger Diatonic-Symmetric harmony system. This technique is described in the 2-volume set on the Schillinger System, and I've discussed some of its fundamentals and nomenclature aspects in a set of videos. In the Schillinger diatonic harmony system, both chord structure and root movement are based on the first expansion of a 7-pitch diatonic scale. This yields chords in thirds, and we may vary the harmonic tension by selecting appropriate chords from the collection of triads and dissonant 7th, 9th and 11th chords, and by playing with the distribution of either positive or negative root cycles. In the strict diatonic system there is rather limited tension control, and the music idiom is tonal and sounding traditional. In the Diatonic-Symmetric system we separate the selection of chord root and chord type. The former is still based on the degrees of a diatonic scale, but now chord types are picked from a predetermined set. This will introduce non-diatonic pitches in the progression. Tension level control has improved, but still is limited by the chord structures in thirds. I will illustrate that with 3 chord progression examples. Here's the set of triad chord types in a 7-pitch diatonic scale. The set size is 4 and includes the major, minor, augmented and diminished triad. The first progression is a 4-part setting of triads and root position, with chordal function 1 in the bass. Most of the root movements use positive cycles, except for the 2 cases of R-3 and ascending third in the bass. The example closes with a dominant tonic cadence. Since we have a 4-part setting, there must be 1 chordal function doubling in the upper layer. Here we double either the root or the third. Since chord type is selected independent of the root degree, in the Diatonic-Symmetric system we obtain non-diatonic pitches that are best resolved by chromatic stepwise voice leading, as shown here. Let's listen to this chord progression. Note the traditional tonal sound. In example 2, the bass part is still diatonic in B-flat major. The new element here is the use of inverted triads. The inversion type is shown both as chordal function number in the bass and as chord symbol. As in the previous example, independent chord type selection from the set of 4 triad structures yields chromatism. here with correct stepwise voice leading. Again, the setting is conventional with a limited tension variation. The third example demonstrates diatonic-symmetric harmony in the E Dorian minor mode. It closes with a parallel tonic major chord. All other aspects remain the same, with the diatonic bass part and independent chord type selection in the upper layer. And now it's time to stir up things. The first modification is the integration of the chord type classification scheme as proposed by German composer Paul Hindemith in the 1930s. In his book, Hindemith extends the traditional tonal harmony idiom by using a fresh reasoning approach to the harmonic series and musical acoustics. He derives two series, Reihe 1 and 2, that are used for the interpretation of root movement and intervals. For the fundamental on the left, the first series shows increasing root proximity when going to the left. We see the familiar dominant tonic root movement R5, the descending fifth, here from G to C. Note that we see alternating positive-negative root cycles according to labeling in the Schillinger system. There's an equivalent tendency in the second series, with more stable consonant intervals to the left and increasing levels of dissonance to the right. Note that Hindemith omits the tritone interval, the sixth semitone interval, from this diagram. Next we consider an important aspect in the Hindemith harmony proposal. Valid, useful chord structures must include a stable interval such as the perfect fifth or its inversion, the perfect fourth. The limiting allowed case is the chord that does not include the fifth, but includes a major third, the four semitones interval or its inversion. Chords without either the perfect fifth or the major third may not be used in this classification scheme for tension control in a quasi-diatonic idiom. This scheme also takes into account the presence of dissonant intervals and the number of tritones, leading to 6 possible chord groups. Here's the original loose-leaf appendix from the book. We see a classification with the groups and chord structure examples. The left-right separation is in 2 main categories, without and with a tritone interval. We see the 6 groups with decreasing tonal stability as we move from group level 1 to 6. Subgroups indicate either root position or chord inversion, or the presence of multiple tritone intervals. Examples are shown for 3 to 6 note chords. I reproduced this diagram in Finale as a safety backup measure, in case I lose the original document. However, I cannot show it in detail, respecting the copyright. Scrolling along the document we see group 1, chords that contain neither a tritone nor dissonant seconds or sevenths. This group includes major and minor triads. At group level 2 we find 1 or more tritone intervals, but the chords do not include a highly dissonant minor second or major seventh. In group 3 chords there are seconds and seventh intervals, but no tritones. This includes many major and minor seventh chords. At level 4 we see both tritones and highly dissonant intervals. Group 3 and 4 contain the majority of chord structure options. The scheme ends with two groups that Hindemith labels as undeterminable, unbestimmbar, and these include the augmented triad and the triad structure in perfect fourths in group 5 and all forms of diminished chords in group 6. The chord structure examples in the diagram are incomplete. Hindemith writes unähnliche. However, we may easily achieve completeness by taking the next step and consider the interval properties in pitch class set theory. Here we see the full approach in this tutorial. We integrate the framework of Schillinger Diatonic-Symmetric harmony with the Hindemith chord classification scheme and apply a mapping of the pitch class set interval vector. Pitch class set theory is discussed in this textbook by Alan Forte. I created a free online tool on my website that presents all PC sets and several of its properties. The usage of this tool was discussed in a separate video on this channel, and here are the essentials needed for this tutorial. Each pitch class set has a unique label shown on the left. The prime form shows the pitch classes in the set in the closest grouping in ascending order. On the right we see the interval vector with its 6 elements. The 6 vector elements list the number of intervals in the set. For example, here the last element N6 has the value of 1. There is a single tritone in this set. The two numbers on the left, N1 and N2, list the presence of dissonant seconds or their equivalents sevenths. The other three indicate consonant intervals of the third and fourth. Now let's map the values in the PC set interval vector onto the Hindemith chord classification scheme. Remember, valid chords in this expanded quasi-tonal idiom must contain either a perfect fifth or major third. This means that we must have non-zero values for N4 and N5. The top-level classification is based on the presence of a tritone interval. On the left we have the chord structures without 6 semitone intervals, so N6 is 0. On the right there may be one or more tritones, so N6 is equal to or greater than 1. The non-tritone chords are then subcategorized depending on the presence of dissonant seconds or sevenths. We therefore must look at the value of N1 and N2. In the tritone chord main category, we separate the mild dissonance group 2 from the sharp dissonances in group 4. In the former case, the value of N1 must be 0. We find the special chords in group 5 and 6. We see the interval vector for the symmetric augmented chord and the triad in perfect fourths on the left. On the right we find the diminished chords with the prominence of minor third intervals, and therefore N3 must be equal to or greater than 1. This mapping enables us to put all possible chord structures, written as pitch class sets, in Hindemith groups that each are characterized by their tension level. I want to illustrate the process with a pitch class set example. Here PC set 3-8, shown in staff notation and in the pitch disk diagram on the left. The prime form of the set contains 3 pitch classes, 0, 2 and 6, or equivalently C, D and F sharp. We will determine the interval vector. There are 3 intervals in the set, so the interval vector elements will sum to 3. The interval between C and D is 2 semitones, therefore N2 is 1. From C to F sharp there is the 6 semitone tritone interval, and N6 is 1. Finally, From G to F sharp is a major third or 4 semitones. That completes the interval vector 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. The best tonal harmony equivalent for this set is the inverted dominant 7th chord on the root D, with the 5th omitted. This is written in general as structure S7 no 5. Next, we may label the set as a Hindemith chord group. There's a single tritone in this chord, but it lacks the sharp dissonance of a minor second. Therefore, it is classified as a group 2 structure, in the subgroup of the inverted chords. We may repeat this for all 12 possible 3-element PC sets, the result of which is shown here in overview. The Forte prime form label is shown at the top, the Hindemith chord classification below. The classification result in the Hindemith table shows that 10 PC sets fit the scheme, while 2 have been rejected. All 6 possible groups contain 1 or more 3-element sets. PC set 3-7 is the triad in fourths. It is ambiguous and may be categorized as either group 3 or 5. So, now we have a much broader spectrum of original and inverted triad types to use for harmonic tension control, when compared to the 4 Schillinger diatonic triad types. This set includes modern chord types, such as the triads without the third, that is, the S2 and S4 frequently used in pop and film music, and the Lydian and Phrygian modal triads. Using this diagram, we now may write more interesting chord progressions in Schillinger Diatonic-Symmetric harmony. So, reaching the end of the theoretical part of this tutorial, what have we achieved? We greatly expanded the set of possible chord types in a quasi-tonal musical idiom by considering pitch class set interval properties. The set size is 10 chord types, including more advanced and modern music triad structures. Not only are there the chords in thirds, that is, with intervals of 3 or 4 semitones, but now we also see structures with 2 and 5 semitones, and modal variants with 1 and 6 semitone intervals. Each chord in the set has a tension level classification according to the scheme proposed by Paul Hindemith. Note that this tutorial has been considering 3-element sets only. The tension level control potential is even greater for 4, 5 and 6 note chords, an aspect left for future episodes. Here's a quick preview of the classification of all 28 possible 4-element sets. And now it's time to apply this tension control mechanism to some example chord progressions. The first Schillinger Hindemith example contains 9 chords with low tension level. The bass part is diatonic in F major. We open and close the progression with the tonic degree chord, and there's a dominant tonic closing cadence. All root cycles are positive with one exception. The example uses 4 PC sets only. The tension level shows a typical curve, with values between 1 and 3. As before, I applied correct voice leading to the resulting non-diatonic notes in the upper layer. Voice leading is smooth and mostly stepwise, with correct preparation and resolution of the dissonant sevenths. The overall character is tonal traditional, but note that we used one chord type that was not available in the original Schillinger set. It is the group 3 tension level B flat major 7th chord with omitted 5th in measure 6. The next example purposely uses a wide tension level curve. In this chord progression there are 12 triads in the F-sharp Dorian minor mode. The quasi-tonal character is expressed by the diatonic bass part. The majority of root cycles is positive. We use 5 of the 6 possible Hindemith chord groups. There's a dominance of high tension level triads near 2/3 of this progression. This acts as a sort of harmonic climax. Most non-diatonic notes resolve stepwise in the right direction, with one exception. Note the interval relations between the outer parts. That was also controlled by deliberate design and includes the distribution of consonant intervals and may involve contrary motion between lead and bass part. This is a well-known aspect in jazz big band writing, as I have discussed in my ebook on arranging. And this aspect returns in Hindemith harmony and deserves more attention in future tutorials. The overall sound of this chord progression is far more modern and advanced. Still, it has a certain degree of tonal anchoring. The third example remains at high tension level. We see 11 chords in G Ionian major mode, and there's a plagal closing. Note that there is one altered note G sharp in the bass in measure 5, the result of chord inversion in order to create a more interesting bass part. The high tension level and tonal instability is also supported by the use of more negative root cycles. The chord structures belong to the Hindemith groups 2 to 4. Again, there is maximum tension near the golden section. The voice leading of non-diatonic notes is indicated. There's one stepwise resolution in the wrong direction and a case of middle part chromatic steps. This yields a modern texture full of dissonance. I wanted to demonstrate how such a chord progression design can be turned into a more realistic orchestral example. So I returned to example 3, creating a suspense music cue at fairly slow tempo. The instrumentation is for 5 woodwinds, 3 French horns, vibraphone, celesta and string section. I present this 1.5 minute long example in an annotated condensed score. This concludes the tutorial. My goal was to present a practical extension of the Schillinger Diatonic-Symmetric harmony writing technique. The set of chords was increased from 4 to 10 triad types and now includes more modern and advanced structures as they are used in pop, film and game music. That was achieved by integrating the Hindemith chord type classification scheme and considering the interval vector properties from all possible pitch class sets. Remember that this episode only discussed 3 element sets. The potential for harmony tension level control in a chord progression is greatly increased when we start looking at chords with more parts in the future. Hopefully I succeeded in providing you with another practical technique for your composer's toolbox. Please subscribe to my channel, like and share this video. Donations on my website in support of my video production efforts will certainly be appreciated, and thanks for watching.